So today we're going to talk about everything that you need to know about Welsh and English birth certificates. We're going to talk a bit about their origins. We're going to talk about what information they contained. We're going to talk about how to get them. And then finally, we're going to talk about what I'm most excited about, which is why you need to look for originals. Um, so you might have originals at home, or you might have them, they might be at someone else's home, a relative that you know, or a relative that you've yet to find. Um, and I'm most excited about that because I found some birth certificates the other day and they had some really interesting things on them. Origins. July 1st, 1837 is one of the most important dates when it comes to looking at the Welsh and English records. Um, in 1837, uh, there was the Marriages Act, and then there was the Birth and Deaths Registration Act. So these two acts, they kind of they totally transformed what kind of records were being produced in Wales and England, and they transformed the organizations that were actually creating the records. So prior to 1837, most of the records that you get are parish records that were produced by the religious institutions. So they might be the local Anglican parish church or the nonconformist chapel. And so they were the people that were keeping track of what was going on. So then 1837 happens and these acts passed and civil registration happens. And so the General Records or General Register Office was created. And in addition to the baptisms, the burials, and the marriages that the parish church or the nonconformist chapels were keeping, this new organization was keeping the civil births and civil deaths and civil marriages. So 1837, always keep in mind also the information that you get after 1837 in a lot of cases is much better information, or there's more bits of information. So like for the marriages, you get parents' names and occupations and the place that the people lived. Hi, Davina, and hi, David. I'm glad that you're watching. So now we're going to look at what an actual birth certificate looks like. So this is a birth certificate that I purchased from the General Register Office for £7. There is now a new kind of structure to how you order the records, and you can get them for £2.50, which is really great. So this is a birth certificate. You have tons of information. Um, you have the registrar's district. So there were districts set up all across Wales and England that were kind of the centralized places where this information was recorded and the records were created. So we have the Swansea Union Registrar's District, Swansea in particular in that union. We have the date being 1855. We have when the person, in this case Harriet Rees, when she was born, the 2nd of May, 1855. You have her address, 22 Greyhound Street in Swansea. Her first name, the sex, so she's a girl. The name and surname of her father, David Rees. Her mother's name and her maiden name, Margaret Rees, formerly Jones. Her father's occupation, he was a shipmaker in pottery. I think I'm reading that correctly. Then the informant, or the person who actually went to the register's office to get this record created, they would sign or give their mark in the case of Margaret, and their address. The date when they registered, which was the 4th of June, 1855. So this was about a month after Harriet was born. and then the name and signature of the register. So John Oakshott, who was the register. And then you also have a column for the baptismal name, which can be added later. So as you can see, there's tons of information on this. One of the things that is really great about this is the maiden name of the mother. So in this case, she was a Jones, which you might be a bit less enthused to find, but it's great information to have. So the thing about the maiden name is that when you actually go and search the General Register's office on their website, which I have in the description, a link to their website, you can actually search by the mother's maiden name. Or if you search by anything, the result that comes up that is free and you don't have to pay for will include what the mother's maiden name is. You can get a lot of information without actually purchasing these records, which is really great. And these, I've added in some arrows to show what information you can actually search by when you're searching the General Register's office website. So you could put in the registrar's district if you know it. So Swansea, you can put in the child's full name. You have to put either male or female. You can search. You have to also put in the year. You can do ±2 at the most if you're not sure exactly when they were born. And you can also search by the mother's maiden name. What I normally do when I make searches, I put in the full name and I put in the date, obviously, and the registrar's district, and then I just search by that, and I kind of make my decision on who is the person that I'm looking for based on what the mother's surname is, maiden name is. And I don't have an image of the General Register's office website here, but if you just type into Google GRO birth search, it should be one of the first ones to come up. So yeah, this is the £7 version that I bought. This is what you get for the £2.50 version. It's all the same information. It's just without that information at the top. They've included like a standard sheet of what those columns actually mean. It's the same information and it's cheaper, so always opt for this one. This is another Harriet Reese that I've purchased a record for, which gets us to the dangers of the General Register office. The danger with Welsh research is that a lot of people had the exact same name. And so I've purchased a record for this Harriet Reese, daughter of David and Margaret Reese. I've also purchased a record for Harriet, daughter of David and Margaret, who is actually the same David and Margaret, just with a second child, also named Harriet. I've also purchased this record for Harriet Reese, daughter of Matthew and Carolyn. And I've also purchased this record for Harriet Reese, daughter of William and Sarah. And not a single one of these people is who I was looking for, because I'm looking for a Harriet Reese who was my 3 times great-grandmother, the daughter of a Henry Reese. And that's just the unfortunate thing about purchasing these records is that if you have someone with a very common name and you don't know exactly what their birth date is, and you don't know the mother's maiden name, then you're kind of going trial and error through the people. So if you were to search like a David Davis in a registration district, or a John Jones and Anne Williams, anyone with a name like that, this may not be the best option for you. It might be better to look for like replacement records, like baptisms or a an obituary might have a lot of this same information in it. A marriage like in the newspaper might have a lot of this information, or even just like a parish marriage record will have a lot of the same information. So, yeah, these aren't always going to be the best option for your research. The other thing is that, oh, one thing I wanted to mention this is that these acts that brought into that created the General Register's office and created civil registration. You had a time limit for when you had to register your child. So if you look at these, 2nd of May, she was born, 4th of June, she was registered, 24th of April, born, 25th of May, she was registered. So you had to register your child after 15 days because infant mortality was very high. So you wait 15 days and then you have until 6 months to register your child. If you don't register your child since before 6 months passes, then you have to pay a fine. And the fine was anywhere up to £50. And that's a lot of money. Especially if we're talking about like the 1830s, 1840s, even up till more recently. That's a lot of money. And so I've been searching for actually Harriet Reese's husband, Arthur Bellew, who is my 3 times great-grandfather, and I cannot find him with any combination of his names in on the website for the General Register's office. My suspicion is that because his family they were moving around a lot, they were very, very poor. At one point, his father disappeared, um, just like had a very unstable, like growing up in some ways. I think that they might have missed that 6 month um, time period to register his birth, and then they just didn't have the money to pay the fine, so they just never like went back and did it. And that wouldn't surprise me. So sometimes it's really hard to find the people that you're looking for. Now, my favorite part: look for original copies at home or at your relatives' houses, or if you meet people who are related to you while doing your family history, ask them to look for copies at home. Because I found this the other day. This is the certified copy of an entry of birth for my great-grandmother. Her name was Bessie May Bellew, or Jessie Bellew, she went by. This certified copy, it's not original to the date of her birth, which was in 1910. It's original to, if you look down at the bottom, the 27th of November, 1934. So what happened is that for some reason, either she or, well, probably her, because she would have been 24 years old, she needed a copy of her birth certificate for some reason, and she went to the General Register's office in Swansea and got a copy of that record. And so that's what this was created on that day in November 27th, 1934. Sorry, I'm living in the 19th century. Oh, 1934. And the thing with original documents, the thing that you always want to do. Oh, sorry, there's a question here. Are there any left referring to the Harriet Reese? Sad to know they weren't the ones you wanted, but at least you've definitely ruled them out. There is one Harriet Reese left who was born in the time period that I'm looking for. And I'll get that record eventually, and hopefully it's her, and if it's not, then I don't know what to do. But so back to these original copies, The thing that you always want to do with these original copies is flip it over and look and see what's on the back. So I did that with this one. There's nothing there, which is fine. But then we have this other copy of my great-grandmother, my nanny's birth certificate. So still born in 1910, and this copy was created November 2nd, 1928. And when you flip this over, pointing to the date, you flip this over, and there's all this information. And this is what you're not going to get when you purchase a birth certificate from the General Register's office now. None of this extra information is here. And the reason that this information is here, well, before we get to the reason, actually, it's got all kinds of additional information. So this information is contemporary to November 1st, 1928. So in 1928, her father's occupation was a transport worker. In 1928, she lived at 5 Thomas Terrace, Morriston. And this information is different from what's on the actual birth certificate, the original. So if you look at here above her name, Jessie Bellew, it says approved society or association, insurance committee, employment exchange, other body or person for whom the certificate is required. So in this case, it was employment exchange. And that's what this other information is at the top. She specifically went to the General Register's office in Swansea in 1928 because she needed a copy of her birth certificate or the National Health Insurance Act of 1924 and the Unemployment Insurance Act of 1920 to 1924. So what was actually going on in 1928 when she was 18 years old is that she was unemployed and she needed to find a job. So she went to the employment exchange, which are like, they're like a public office meant to help people find employment. She went there and she said, I need help finding employment. They said, we need a copy of your birth certificate. And she went and did this. And I don't know any of that information. I didn't know any of that story until I looked at the back of this birth certificate. And so it's through this employment exchange that maybe she found her job working in the tinplate factory. So here with the blue arrow above her is my Nana. She worked as a tinplate worker, and it might be the case that she found that employment through this employment exchange. So it's taking this like I was expecting to find information about her birth, but I found information about her at 18 years old, which was amazing. I also have this copy of my great-grandfather's birth certificate. So her husband, Thomas Davis of Morriston outside of Swansea. And this copy was made in 1920 when he was 14 years old. And on the back of this one is also all this information. This particular copy of his birth certificate was created for the Factory and Workshop Act of 1901. So this act, it was a collection of labor a collection of labor protections. And there were specific parts of this act that gave protections to people who were under 16 years old. And he was 14 and he was getting ready to go and work in the factory. And so what I did, when you find stuff like this, like you can actually go and look up the Factory and Workshop Act of 1901. And I found a copy of it. And you do a search through the body of the book, and you can actually look for certificate of birth. And so what this was specifically is that, and then there's also actually this part, and this part, it outlines what he needed the birth certificate for. And what was happening in 19, what year was it? It was 1920, when he was 14 years old, is that he was getting ready to go and work in the factory. But to do that first, he needed to get a copy of his birth certificate. Then he had to take it to the district surgeon, who would then confirm his age, and then the surgeon would do a physical evaluation of him to see if he was fit to work in the factory. Then the surgeon would fill out a form regarding his physical fitness, and that would be submitted to the factory where he was going to work. So all of this information comes from this one original copy of a birth certificate. And this is stuff that I never would have known otherwise, like I said before. So these old copies of these birth certificates have tons of additional information on them, which is why it's so important to look for them. Look through your old shoebox of family papers, get other relatives to look for things, get new relatives that you're meeting on your family history journey to look through their things, and make sure that you find them. And that's just another example of how to take one single document and kind of turn it into a story. So now I know this story about my great-grandfather when he was 14 years old, and another one about my great-grandmother when she was 18 years old, that I wouldn't have known otherwise, because those really aren't the kind of stories that get passed down through the family. But nevertheless, it gives you a lot of really important information about what their lives were actually like. Like, imagine a 14-year-old working in a factory. I know that things like that still happen today, but we can get an insight into the kind of poverty that his family must have been living, his relationship to education, and all kinds of things like that. So if you are enjoying, make sure to leave a like on the live stream. It helps YouTube know to share it with more people. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you found it useful. Um, Likes and comments help the video get out to more people. And thanks for watching.